So we're going to move on to the next story. And this one is interesting, to say the least. So every single year, Variety does this show, and it's called Actors on Actors. And what they'll do is they'll pair two people up, okay, whether it's two directors or two actors or actresses or whatever, and they will talk about each other's film. In this case, for this particular show, Jennifer Lawrence, okay, was paired up with Viola Davis. And they were having a conversation about it, their films. And so Jennifer Lawrence was talking about The Woman King. And so originally, when Jennifer was talking, one of the points that she had said was, somebody came up when she got the Hunger Games, and by the way, she had already gotten an Academy Award nomination for Winter's Bone. And they said, well, how much weight are you going to lose? And she was still kind of young, and she really didn't know the game. And she said it was a huge responsibility because she knew who the audience was, and it was kids or children, because young adults, I should say, because, everybody was going to dress up as Candace and everything else. So she went on to talk about The Woman King. And she said, this is an actual quote by Lawrence now. I remember when I was doing the Hunger Games, nobody had ever put a woman in the lead of an action movie because it wouldn't work. Because we were told girls and boys can identify with a male lead. But boys cannot identify with a female lead, she said. And it just makes me happy every single time I see a movie come out, and she's talking about The Woman King, that it blows my mind through one of those beliefs, and that proves that it is just a lie to keep certain people out of the movies, to keep certain people in the same position that they've always been, end quote. Forget about the weight issue, because that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the comment at the end of it. I got a couple questions. Number one, do you think it was just an unpopular thing to say? And number two, do you think she was right?
I think she was right. And I think I've seen people say, Jennifer Lawrence is saying that there were no female action heroes before her. And that's not true. I think she's being misinterpreted. Of course she knows, of Ripley, of Sarah Connor, of, Lara Croft. The thing is that what I think Jennifer's getting at is that when the Hunger Games came out, there wasn't exactly a, there wasn't an interest at the time by the studios in an action series, like an action franchise with a, woman lead. And it was due to the fact that I think a number of ones beforehand had not done well, like a Catwoman, like even Tomb Raider with
Angelina Jolie.
They weren't received well by critics, and they didn't exactly, take off at the box office. Now, you did have a Charlie's Angels, right, with a number of women, but I think the Hunger Games was a landmark moment in cinema, for at least blockbuster cinema, for female characters, because you had Katniss, and she wasn't she wasn't, at least when the first movie came out, she wasn't billed as this sex symbol. That I think if you look at Lara Croft, if you look at Charlize Theron and Aeon Flux, these are women, even Halle Berry and Catwoman. If you look at them, they made these women-centered action films almost under the male gaze. So when you're watching, the movies, you're seeing the posters, they're in this sexy attire, and it's almost like they wanted to market the movie to men, by making it look provocative and revealing, where Hunger Games didn't do that. Katniss is also, she's not, I forgot how old Katniss was. I think she was like,
She was around 20 or 21.
yeah.
So, I
So
mean, she was right in that young adult
yeah, it was still a young
range.
adult series too, and I think even like a Twilight, that wasn't really marketed as, female action hero, like this was a big deal. And I understand what she's saying. I think she's right. What about you, David? What do you think?
Yeah, it's not so much it's not so much of the weight issue. I mean, that has been going on for years. I think that when you say something that's unpopular, right? And I always say this, the popular thing isn't necessarily the right thing, and the right thing isn't necessarily the popular thing. And that being said, I don't think this was the popular thing to say. Now, was it, or, was it the right thing to say? Yeah, I do. This is somebody that stood her ground, and because she's been in the business. Listen, she's an Academy Award winner. Okay, I mean that in itself says something. She's a mother now. People forget about this. She's grown up under the public eye for the last, 7, 8 years. I mean, she's played this role as Candace Everdeen, just like, a Daniel Craig would play a James Bond, or a Christian Bale would play a Batman. The thing is that, and she's right. Okay, she at the core of her statement, she's absolutely right. Because to your point, there were plenty of other women action stars. Okay, there was a Ripley in Aliens in 1986. There was a Sarah Connor. There was, I mean, it wasn't action,
Like,
but
if you look at, say, let's take Sarah Connor for instance. She wasn't on the posters. Arnold was on the posters. And the thing is that's a good example of an action star that I think also Jennifer's getting at, where Sarah Connor wasn't being marketed for Terminator. It was Terminator, Arnold. Aliens is an interesting one, but even the first Alien movie, how many posters of that movie had Sigourney Weaver on it?
not many that I know of.
I don't think it's
so.
And I think
Yeah,
that's another reason why. And if you think about this, if you look at Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis, she's not on the poster. And
yeah.
you get to this point where you really are in this, discussion with yourself, looking at, the way that Hollywood has viewed women. And as we can even get into the Wonder Woman story we'll talk about, it's a very interesting thing. Because, I mean, just looking at Wonder Woman was also a big deal because this was the first Wonder Woman movie, and Wonder Woman is arguably, I think it's almost, you can't even say it's arguably, she is the most popular female superhero of all time.
Yeah,
and
easily.
I think that the fact that we hadn't gotten a Wonder Woman movie until 2017 is pretty crazy. I will say though, I want to ask you, by you meaning that it wasn't the popular thing to say, what is the popular thing to say?
Then everything is the status quo. You just talk about I'm sure that they had some sort of script of what they were going to talk about. I mean, she was going to talk about her movie, and Jennifer was going to talk about the Woman King, as they always do. But I really don't know if that Variety or whomever it was had an idea of this is what she's going to say. Because don't forget, okay, people forget about this. I'm sure Variety vetted her. So vetting basically is making what's another, doing not background, but they're going to do background notes and everything else. I'm sure they vetted her and said, okay, what kind of questions are you going to ask her? Where is the conversation going to go and everything else? I'm sure that this was a more adult Jennifer than, listen, if she had done this a few years ago, there's no way she would have done this. She's no way she would have said this stuff. I don't want to say she was throwing, caution to the wind, but she has a better idea of the game now. She knows what it's like to work in Hollywood. She knows what it's like to have to win an Academy Award. She knows what it's like to market herself. And the simple fact of, look, all you got to do even today, look at how many women-led films we've had this year. It's not been a lot. You've had Wakanda Forever. You've had The Woman King, and maybe a couple others. So, to your point, I think they basically wanted her to talk about the status quo. So, I think she was right in her comments. And I think that, Wonder Woman, and we're going to get to this story here in a minute, but Wonder Woman is the biggest star. And look, that movie took 20 years to make. That is not it's not hyperbole either. You can go back and look at the things about that. That movie was in limbo for almost 20 years before Warner Brothers finally decided to say, okay, we're going to go ahead with this. So
I think what you're trying to say, I think I do kind of see what you're saying here. I think you're trying to just say, though, that what Jennifer Lawrence is saying now is something that a lot of women back 10 or so years ago were really unable to say. They were unable to speak out about. And now we're living in a new time, like a period of time where we're starting to finally get to these issues that have been plaguing Hollywood and female representation for so long, that now we do have Jennifer Lawrence and she's now able to speak about this. And it's also, as you were mentioning, in conversation with Viola Davis, who just starred in The Woman King, which is another landmark moment because it is like the first big, like, epic type of war movie that is led by women, African women in Hollywood, because that's something that really I was doing research on it, and like there's like one movie like ever, like even internationally, like one movie that has been made where it's focused on like an African woman kicking ass, and it's a rarity. And I think Hunger Games is definitely one of the films that helped propel that, and we see that with even a number of Scarlett Johansson's movies that have come out since, however those, like Ghost in the Shell, and we see that with a movie like Wonder Woman, Captain Marvel, and that is, I think, the great thing now where Jennifer Lawrence can say what, I think she should. Not that I don't believe it's an unpopular thing for her to say. I believe that it should be the right thing for her to say at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's just, she said, and I'll go on all day about that movie. Forget about the journalistic side. That in itself brought I was watching something the other night about the New York Film Festival about that. And the filmmakers and the journalists, the actual journalists, that was based on a true story. That was based on Harvey Weinstein, But people are being able to speak out. And the thing is, too, it's the last thing I'll say on this, she's an A-list star.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a big difference between an A-list star saying something like that and have gravitas than somebody else just saying, okay, and then just sweep it right under the rug. And the fact that we are in a different climate in today's world in Hollywood really makes it more powerful. So, what do you guys think? Do you think Jennifer Lawrence said the right thing? Do you think she should have said something about it? And my other question to you guys is, do you think there's a problem in Hollywood today about this? Please, if so, leave us your thoughts down in the comments. I'm dying to hear what you guys have to say about this.